and welcome to Once Upon a Time. We are here to tell you some stories, so sit back and relax, and you can listen to some stories. I'm Catherine Poulter. I'm the children's librarian at the Marshall Public Library.
And I am Becca Hayden. I'm also a librarian at Marshall Public Library in the Early Childhood Division.
And so we love to read stories out loud, and I found some really good ones. This one, the first one I'm going to read, is a true story that took place nearly 80 years ago. In fact, 78 years ago, this September, this story began. And the people who were in it didn't know when it would end, if it would end. Because that's how true stories are. You don't know what the end is going to be. In fact, sometimes you don't even know if there is an end. But this is a very beautiful story, and sad, and happy, and good. It's called Irena Sendler and the Children of the Warsaw Ghetto. It's by Susan Goldman Rubin and illustrated by Bill Farnsworth. And this is her true story. Early in the morning of September 1st, 1939, Irena Sendler and her mother huddled in their Warsaw apartment near the radio. The news was alarming. "We heard that German forces had crossed the Polish border at dawn," said Irena. In fact, World War II had begun. During the first weeks of the war, German planes bombed Warsaw, Poland, day after day, night after night. Buildings caught fire and burned. Terrified people scrambled for safety. Irena Sendler, a young Catholic social worker, did her best to tend the wounded and bring bread to the needy, but more and more refugees who had fled towns nearby or had been driven out streamed into Warsaw as the Germans kept up their attack. By September 28, 1939, the Poles surrendered. On October 1st, German troops entered Warsaw. The city and most of Poland was under Nazi rule. Irena immediately joined the resistance movement of the Polish Socialist Party. At this point, along with my most trusted girlfriends, I organized a special crew to save people that were most endangered, she said. Irena and her friends kept Jews from starving by issuing hundreds of false documents identifying them as Polish citizens. This entitled them to financial aid from the Department of Social Welfare in Warsaw. Even though the Germans had forbidden anyone to help the Jews, Irena defied their orders. Aiding Jews was nothing new for her. Back in her student days at the University of Warsaw, Irena had protested when Jewish students were forced to sit separately on a ghetto bench. "I always sat with the Jews," she said, showing them my solidarity. Now she worried about her Jewish friends in the Jewish quarter of Warsaw, known as the ghetto. It was already crowded. Yet the Germans rounded up and packed thousands of Jews from the countryside into the ghetto. In May 1940, the Germans forced Jews to build a wall around the ghetto using bricks from bombed buildings. By November 1940, the wall was 11.5 feet high and topped with slivers of glass and barbed wire. Gates to the rest of Warsaw were guarded by armed police. Jews were forbidden to leave the ghetto, and the police shot anyone rescuing a Jew. The terrible overcrowding and poor sanitation caused a typhus epidemic. The Germans were terrified of any epidemic, said Irena. Therefore, they allowed the Polish authorities to take care of the health and sanitation in the ghetto. Passes allowing us to enter the ghetto were given to us by the Warsaw Disease Control Department. Irena and her friends entered the ghetto dressed as nurses in starched white uniforms and white caps. To show her sympathy, Irena put on an armband with the Star of David, just like the ones on the Jews. Inside, Irena was horrified by what she saw. Old and young were dying on the streets, she said. Barefoot Jewish children in rags begged for bread or money or slept in doorways. In July 1942, the Nazis started emptying out the ghetto. They herded Jewish children and adults into cattle cars going to Treblinka, a death camp where Nazis would kill any Jews who had not already perished from sickness and starvation. The need to organize the removal of the children from the ghetto to the Aryan, that is the non-Jewish side, became an absolute necessity, said Irina. But how could she do it? In December 1942, Irina joined the Council for Aid to Jews, a newly formed underground organization whose code name was Zagota. Irina met with the leader at a secret address. He said together that we could do a great job because I had a network of trusted friends, and he had money, she recalled. Later, he gave me the command of the Department of Help for Jewish Children. Irina's code name was Sister Yolanta. Barely 4 feet 11 inches tall, she risked her life when she disguised herself as a nurse and used a forged medical pass to enter the ghetto. Irina planned ingenious ways to smuggle out children. Goodwill wasn't enough, said Michael Glavinsky, one of the saved children. The work had to be organized, methods of action well thought out. Irina's favorite escape route went through the old courthouse, whose front faced the ghetto and whose back had an entrance on the Aryan side. Some exits were open, said Irina, and with the help of a brave custodian, it was possible to leave there unnoticed. Nazi guards ordered children they suspected were Jews to recite the Lord's Prayer. So before setting out, Irina taught the children how to make the sign of the cross and say basic Roman Catholic prayers. Another scheme was to help teenagers escape with the Work Brigade. The brigade consisted of skilled young people whom the Germans used in workshops on the Aryan side. Each morning the brigade left from an assembly point in the ghetto and returned at night, minus those who had slipped away. Many children fled through the sewers. These operations were timed to the second. Me and my cousin, who was a little younger than me, stood in the gate of our house, and we were ready for our escape, remembered Piotr Zedinger, who was 6 years old at the time. It was already dark. The street was deserted, and silence was interrupted only by the echo of the marching soldiers' boots. Somebody told Piotr to run to the hole in the middle of the road as soon as the soldier passed the gate, and marched 30 steps farther. We counted his steps, said Piotr, because suddenly I heard somebody whisper, "Run!" and I felt a hand on my shoulder. Maybe it was my mother's hand or my father's. They were bidding their goodbyes forever. Piotr and his cousin dashed to the middle of the street where a manhole cover opened. Another hand was waiting for me, said Piotr. Somebody pulled me inside. Not a sound aloud, said the stranger. You cannot talk or cough. We walked behind this man, though we couldn't see him, said Piotr. He carried a flashlight and lit it from time to time. Sometimes Irina hid children under the stretchers and floorboards in an ambulance. The trusted driver, Anthony Dombrowski, kept a dog at the front seat. As the ambulance drove past the Nazi guards, Irina hit the dog's paw to make it bark and drown out any of the noises the children might make. Other children were concealed in fire trucks. The children had to be all covered in sacks, their heads invisible, said Irina. Usually she gave the younger ones a sleeping pill or taped their mouths so they wouldn't cry. She put some in pretend body bags and coffins, and then she and a driver took them to the Jewish cemetery on the other side of the wall, where they stopped and pretended to bury the dead bodies. But of course the children really escaped. Irina even dared to smuggle out babies tucked into potato sacks, suitcases, and toolboxes. When Elzbieta Fitzkovska was 6 months old, her parents let Irina take her. Irina hid Elzbieta in a carpenter's wooden box, and then they slipped in a silver spoon engraved with Elzbieta's first name on one side and her birth date on the other. Persuading parents and grandparents to give up their children was often difficult. A mother might say yes, but then the father would say no. One question every parent asked me was, "Can you guarantee that they will live?" recalled Irina. We had to admit honestly that we could not, as we did not even know if we could succeed in leaving the ghetto that day. The only guarantee was that the children would most likely die if they stayed. Once the children were out, Irina still had to hide them. She and her couriers moved the children from one safe house to another. Sometimes the first stop was Irina's apartment. Years later, men and women she had rescued remembered her holding their hands as they left the ghetto and even staying in their home. Piotr Zettinger, the boy who had escaped through the sewers, said, "I had to learn so much so quickly." Irina placed Piotr and most of the children in Roman Catholic convents and orphanages. Piotr wound up in a Catholic orphanage in Poland. "I knew I could count on the sisters," Irina said. "No one ever refused to take a child from me." Irina placed some of the rescued children with Polish foster parents. Private homes would agree to keep only very young children, she said. Children in these loving homes suffered the least. Irina brought baby Elżbieta to a Polish Catholic midwife who adopted the child and raised her. Many times children had to be moved frequently because blackmailers threatened to turn them in. Through deep sobs, once I picked up a child that needed to go to another hiding place, and the child was crying endlessly. Through deep sobs, he asked me, "Can you tell me, please, how many mommies I can have? Am I going to my mommy number 32? Irina gave the Jewish children Polish names and false birth dates so that they wouldn't be found out. One girl named Rachel was really named Roma. "You're not Itzek," they told Isaac, "you're Yatsek." Another Rachel renamed Zosha used to hide under her blanket at night and pretend to talk to her mother. "Why did you let me go?" she would whisper. "Why am I here? I want to be with you, Mommy. I want to be your little Rachel." It was difficult for Irina to keep any records at all. In April 1943, Jewish fighters organized an uprising in the ghetto, and the Germans retaliated by almost reducing the ghetto to rubble. Yet Irina and her volunteers continued getting people to safe havens. Finally, the Gestapo took Irina to Pawiak prison. There she saw several trusted friends who had also been arrested. Irina realized that their secret meeting point, a laundry room, had been discovered. On the night Irina was about to be executed, the Gestapo truck driver who drove a full truckload with us prisoners from the Pawiak to be shot, "He let me go," she said. The driver had received a huge bribe delivered by a Polish man who worked with the Germans. Irina's friends had paid the bribe. Irina hobbled away as the driver shouted, "Run!" A Gestapo document stated that she had been shot, and the Nazis believed that she was dead, but 2 months later, Irina went into hiding, and the Gestapo discovered that she was alive. "They were after me again," she said. She sneaked away to take care of her sick mother. And then, alas, her mother died. Irina couldn't go to the funeral because she knew the Gestapo would be there looking for her. And she was right. For a while, Irina stayed at a safe house where she had taken many Jewish children and adults. It was the Warsaw Zoo. During the early days of the war, the zoo had been bombed, and the zookeepers had freed some of the animals. The courageous zookeepers had hidden Jews in the empty animal cages. Now Irina was one of their favorite guests. From her various hideouts, Irina continued working for Zagota. She had changed her appearance and had identification papers in a different name. But despite the risk, she promised that she would take as many children as she could to safety. Finally, on August 1st, 1944, the Warsaw Uprising broke out. Children, women, and Jewish volunteers fought alongside young Polish soldiers. Artillery shells crackled. Grenades exploded. Hundreds and thousands of people died, and almost all of Warsaw was destroyed. However, Irina survived, and her precious papers that she was able to keep stayed safe under an apple tree. Finally, on January 17, 1945, Soviet troops finally liberated Warsaw. Many of the children that Irina had saved grew up not knowing that they were Jewish, especially when they were very young, when they were adopted. Most of their parents and grandparents had been killed. However, Irina had saved as much precious information as she could on a little card index, and some of the children were able to go back to their parents. Once when Irina was asked if she had rescued Jewish children for religious reasons, she said, "No, I rescued them because my heart told me to do so." And here is a picture of Irina when she was a very old woman. What an amazing story. And it was true. The end.
I'm so glad you read that story.
It was beautiful. Thank you for finding it.
You're welcome. I thought it might be fun to read a book about the moon, you know, in light of the eclipse that we just all were able to enjoy, or a lot of us. And so I am going to read Papa, Please Get the Moon for Me, written and illustrated by Eric Carle, who is world famous for his beloved children's picture books. And also he wrote this book for his daughter Kirsten, and so it's very special to him. Before Monica went to bed, she looked out the window and saw the moon. The moon looked so near. I wish I could play with the moon, thought Monica, and reached for it. But no matter how much she stretched, she could not touch the moon. Papa, said Monica to her father, please get the moon for me. Papa got a very long ladder. He carried the very long ladder towards a very high mountain. Then Papa put the very long ladder on top of the very high mountain. I hope you can see this. There.
Wow.
Up and up he climbed. Now we're going to see a very big picture. Would you mind to pull that down, Catherine? Thank you. Oh, it's big. Finally, Papa got the moon. My daughter, Monica would like to play with you, said Papa, but you are much too big. Every night I get a little smaller, said the moon. When I am just the right size, you can take me. And indeed, the moon got smaller and smaller and smaller. When the moon was just the right size, Papa took it. Down and down and down he climbed. Then one night, down and down and down he climbed. There we go. Here, said Papa to Monica, I have the moon for you. Monica jumped and danced with the moon. She hugged the moon and threw it into the air. But the moon kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and finally it disappeared altogether. Then one night, Monica saw a thin sliver of the moon reappear. Each night the moon grew and grew and grew, and now it was full. And more beautiful stars. The end.
Oh, that's such a nice story.
It's very gentle and very beautiful.
It is. Well, I just really recently got back from a wonderful trip, and one of the places I went was to Paris. And I found this wonderful story about a famous woman named Julia Child, who also lived in Paris for a little while. This book is called Minette's Feast, and it is about a kitty. Here's Minette's Feast, The Delicious Story of Julia Child and Her Cat, by Susanna Reich, illustrated by Amy Bates. Minette Mimosa McWilliams' Child was a very lucky cat, perhaps the luckiest cat in all of Paris. Day and night she could hear the bells of St. Clotilde tolling the hour. And day and night she could smell the delicious smells of mayonnaise, hollandaise, cassoulets, cheese soufflés, and duck pâtés, wafting from the pots and pans of her owner, Julia Child. But life had not always been like this for Minette. Oh no, not at all. Several years earlier, Julia Child had moved to Paris with her husband, Paul. They had no children, nor did they ever have any pets. But they had each other. Every weekend, arm in arm, they wandered down the cobblestone streets, poking into little shops and peeking into hidden courtyards. And every time they went out for a walk, they enjoyed a fine meal. They nibbled croissants in cafes where cats curled on chairs. They munched on baguettes in bistros where the birds warbled in cages. They dined on rolls in restaurants where little white poodles rested at ladies' feet. "You are the butter to my bread," Paul told Julia. Julia and Paul's apartment was dark and so cold in the winter that they had to wear coats in the living room. There were birds on the windowsill and mice in the walls. The kitchen was up a narrow flight of stairs, and there was no refrigerator, only an icebox, but this was home. And Julia and Paul warmed it with family and friends. There was only one thing missing. Une maison sans chat, c'est la vie sans soleil. A house without a cat is like life without sunshine. And so Julia and Paul adopted Minette, a mischievous, energetic pussycat with a lovely speckled coat. Or shall we say, Minette adopted Julia and Paul. Julia and Paul were charmed by Minette's delicate whiskers, her superior nose, and her quick little paws. Here was a cat who thoroughly enjoyed life's many pleasures, long naps, soft laps, and of course lunch. But for Minette, no ordinary meal would do. Like any self-respecting French cat, Minette wouldn't dream of eating food out of a can. What a thrill to pounce on an unsuspecting bird. How delightful to crunch fresh-caught mouse, devoured on the living room rug. Ah! Julia spent mornings at the marketplace buying meat from Le Boucher, bread from La Boulangère, milk and cheese from La Crèmerie, and cake from La Pâtisserie. I'm sorry, my French isn't perfect. Afterwards, she'd make a splendid lunch for herself and Paul, and offer Minette the leftovers. Minette might even take a nibble, but of course mouse and bird were much preferred. Sometimes, nice old fish lady at the marketplace gave Julia a luscious fish head for Minette. Julia would cook them up in a pot. Perhaps she'd add a dollop of scrumptious chicken liver custard. Minette might even take a nibble, but it seemed that mouse and bird were really much preferred. Julia was determined to improve her cooking, so she went to the marketplace for advice. At the vegetable stand, an old lady showed her how to tell a good potato from a bad one. At the supply store, Julia bought enough knives to fill a pirate ship. She carted home a giant cookbook, and she learned how to stir 2 pots at the same time. Minette was not impressed. And so Julia signed up for classes at Le Cordon Bleu, the famous cooking school. When Chef Bernard, the teacher, taught her to slice and dice, mince and chop, she paid close attention. "I never had taken anything so seriously," she later wrote. Husband and cat accepted. At home, Minette took her job seriously too. She perfected her hunting skills by chasing a Brussels sprout tied to a string. As the months passed, Julia became quite the gourmet cook. She baked and blanched, blended and boiled, drained and dried, dusted and fried. She floured and flipped, pitted and plucked, rinsed and roasted, sizzled and skimmed. And when she wasn't trimming, toasting, or topping, She was washing, whipping, and whisking. At Julia's feet, Minette purred with contentment. The smells were heavenly, the tastes delightful. Still, there was Mouse. One chilly fall morning, Julia decided to test a new recipe. Perhaps it would be even better than Mouse. She went to the marketplace and bought a special cut of meat. She rubbed it with salt and pepper and showered it with herbs and spices. Then she placed it on the windowsill and waited for the flavors to develop. For 3 days, Minette waited too. Finally, the meat was ready to cook. Julia eased it into a pan, tucked some vegetables around it, and popped the pan in the oven. The meat bubbled and spat, but when it was done, Julia proudly carried the platter to the table. Ooh la la, magnifique! For 3 days, Julia and Paul feasted on the leftovers while Minette waited for a nibble. When Julia finally laid the platter on the floor, bits of meat still clung to the bone. "Would you like to try this, Pussycat?" asked Julia. Minette crept up to the platter. She sniffed, she twitched, and then she pounced. Ooh la la, magnifique! Minette attacked that bone, gnawing it and chewing it and rolling it around on the floor. She frisked and flounced, darted and batted. She tiptoed and hopped, danced and pranced. She jumped and rolled, curled and stretched, raced and ran, gurgled and purred. And then she licked herself all over and took a nice long nap. Minette Mimosa McWilliams' child was a very lucky cat, perhaps the luckiest in all of Paris. She lived upstairs in an old gray house 1 block from the River Seine. Day and night she could hear the bells of St. Clotilde tolling the hour, and day and night she could smell the delicious smells of mayonnaise, hollandaise, cassoulet, cheese soufflés, and duck pâtés wafting from the pots and pans of her owner, Julia Child. Bon appetit, Minette. Still, there would always be Mouse. The end.
Oh, très bien, très bien.
Oh, merci beaucoup.
I am now going to read a book about the water cycle. It is titled Water is Water, and it's written by Miranda Paul and illustrated by Jason Chin. The illustrations are lovely, and the words are pretty much like a poem.
Even though it's about the water cycle.
Yes. Science in a poem. Water is water. For Neil and Jennifer. Drip, sip, pour me a cup. Water is water unless it heats up. Whirl, swirl, watch it curl by. Steam is steam unless it cools high. A dragon in a wagon, a crow kneading dough. Clouds are clouds unless they form low. Misty, twisty, where is the town? Back to school. Fog is fog unless it falls down. Patter, splatter, what is that sound? Rain is rain unless on the ground. Slosh in galoshes, splash to your knees. Puddles are puddles unless puddles freeze. Glide, slide, put on the brakes. Ice is ice unless it forms flakes. Pack, stack, shape it, and smack. Snow is snow unless spring comes back. Creep, seep, squish in your boots. Mud is mud unless there are roots. Swig, grow big, reach for the best. Apples are apples unless they get pressed. Drip, sip, pour me a cup. Cider is cider until we drink up. The end.
Oh, what a great story. I like that. Now, school just started. And so
Indeed.
I found one of my favorite school stories. It's called Miss Nelson is Missing. This is by James Marshall and Harry Allard. And this was written a long time ago. This book was written back in 1977. But it's still a very good story now. Here we go. The kids in room 207 were misbehaving again. Spitballs stuck to the ceilings. Paper planes whizzed through the air. They were the worst behaved class in the school. "Settle down now," said Miss Nelson in a sweet voice. But the class would not settle down. They whispered and giggled. They squirmed and made faces. They were even rude during the story hour. And they always refused to do their lessons. "Something will have to be done," said Miss Nelson. The next morning, Miss Nelson did not come to school. "Wow," yelled the kids, "now we can really act up." They began to make more spitballs and paper planes. "Today, let's be just terrible," they said. "Not so fast," hissed an unpleasant voice. A woman in an ugly black dress stood before them. "I am your new teacher, Miss Viola Swamp." And she rapped the desk with her ruler. "Where's Miss Nelson?" asked the kids. "Never mind that," snapped Miss Swamp. "Open those arithmetic books." Miss Nelson's kids did as they were told. They could see that Miss Swamp was a real witch. She meant business. Right away she put them to work, and she loaded them down with homework. "We'll have no story hour today," said Miss Swamp. "Keep your mouths shut," said Miss Swamp. "Sit perfectly still," said Miss Swamp. "And if you misbehave, you'll be sorry," said Miss Swamp. The kids in room 207 had never worked so hard. Days went by, and there was no sign of Miss Nelson. The kids missed Miss Nelson. "Maybe we should try to find her," they said. Some of them went to the police. Detective McSmog was assigned to the case. He listened to their story. He scratched his chin. He said. I think Miss Nelson is missing." Detective McSmog would not be much help. Other kids went to Miss Nelson's house. The shades were tightly drawn and no one answered the door. In fact, the only person they did see was the wicked Miss Viola Swamp coming up the street. "If she sees us, she'll give us more homework." They got away just in time. Maybe something terrible happened to Miss Nelson. "Maybe she was gobbled up by a shark," said one of the kids, but that didn't seem likely. "Maybe Miss Nelson went to Mars," said another kid, but that didn't seem likely either. "I know," exclaimed one know-it-all. "Maybe Miss Nelson's car was carried off by a swarm of angry butterflies," but that was the least likely of all. The kids in room 207 became very discouraged. It seemed that Miss Nelson was never coming back, and they would be stuck with Miss Viola Swamp forever. They heard footsteps in the hall. "Here comes the witch," they whispered. "Hello, children," someone said in a sweet voice. It was Miss Nelson! "Did you miss me?" she asked. "We certainly did," cried all the kids. "Where were you?" "That's my little secret," said Miss Nelson. "How about a story hour?" "Oh, yes," cried the kids. Miss Nelson noticed that during story hour, no one was rude or silly. "What brought about this lovely change?" she asked. "That's our little secret," said the kids. Back home, Miss Nelson took off her coat and hung it in the closet, right next to an ugly black dress. When it was time for bed, she sang a little song. "I'll never tell," she said to herself with a smile. P.S. Detective McSmog is working on a new case. He is looking for Miss Viola Swamp. The end.
I love that classic.
Yes.
Here is a brand new book in Marshall Library. This is about the wonderful life of Louis the Chihuahua. But he has a strange sense that something is about to change. Here is Tony Fusil's book, Poor Louis. Oh, hello. You're probably wondering what I'm doing here in the dark, by myself, with all this stuff. If you guessed that I tried to run away tonight, you're right. I did. Why? Well, that's a long story. I can tell you, if you like. My name is Louis, by the way. Or it was. Now they just call me Poor Louis. My life was great. Every morning started with a walk, rain or shine. On Sundays, we would do fun things like go for a stroll in the park, eat ice cream, or go shopping. Pretty much every day of the week ended the same way. Dinner, a movie, a kiss goodnight, and then off we went to sleep. Once in a while, Mom and I would have a play date with her friends. It was great. Everyone paid attention to me. But then, one day, they started to appear. First, there was just one, then two, then four. They pulled on my ears and squeezed my tummy. Mom! Poor Louis. Yeah, I know, they smell good and they do walk on all fours. I'll give them that. But geez, all I could say was, thank goodness we'll never have one of those in our house. Yep, life was pretty perfect with just the three of us. Then let me tell you, things got weird. First it was dinner, cold, on the floor. Poor Louis. I still had my walks, I guess, sort of. Bedtime wasn't fun anymore. Packard. Pablo, Packard, Patrick, Paul, Peabody, Percival, Peter, Peyton. Over time, Mom's belly grew and grew and grew until one night it kicked me, boom! From that night on, I slept on the floor, and me and my food dish just together. Things couldn't possibly get worse, right? Wrong. One day Mom and Dad came home with lots of new stuff. At first it seemed okay. There were 2 beds. Fun. 2 walking pouches. Good, can't have enough of those. 2 sweaters. Cute. 2 hats. Okay, but wait a minute, I thought. What's that thing? 2 seats? And that's when it hit me. Poor Louis. One of those creatures I could handle, but 2, no way. Then Mom and Dad just rushed off and left me all alone, not even a kiss goodbye. Well, that was the last straw. I got all my things together and ran away forever. The coast was clear. I was on my way when... Louis, how did you get out? I must have left the door open. Your Mom and Dad will be home soon. Back you go. And that's it. The end. My life is over. You can close the book now. Thanks for listening. Lou? Louis, meet your baby brother. My baby brother. My baby brother! Poor Louis. The end. Changes can be good.
Oh, that was so sweet. I like that. I have one called Alisaurus and the First Day of School by Richard Torrey. This was another one to celebrate school. Here we go. Time to wake up, sleepyhead, said Mother. My name is not Sleepyhead, it's Alisaurus, said a voice from beneath the covers. Very well, Alisaurus, said Mother. We don't want to be late for your first day of school. Roar, said Alisaurus. Taking off her favorite dinosaur pajamas, Allosaurus dressed in her brand new first day of school outfit. "Your pants are on backwards," said Father. "That's so my dinosaur tail can stick out," explained Allosaurus. "Let's wear our pants the right way," said Father. "Roar!" said Allosaurus. She chomped her cinnamon toast with fierce teeth. "There's no room for my stuffed dinosaurs," said Allosaurus as she packed her new dinosaur backpack. "They'll be waiting for you when you get home," said Father. "Do you think there will be other dinosaurs in my class?" asked Allosaurus. "I think you're going to make a lot of new friends," said Mother. The teacher, Miss Woolhandler, stood at the classroom door greeting the new students. "Are you Allie?" asked Mrs. Woolhandler. "Yes, but you can call me Allosaurus," said Allosaurus. "Wonderful," said Miss Woolhandler. "And you can call me Mrs. W." At snack time, Allosaurus chomped her grapes with fierce teeth. "Roar! This is how dinosaurs eat." The other children ate their snacks quietly. Mrs. W's class worked hard all morning. They made nameplates for their cubbies. "I'm making a dinosaur," said Allosaurus. "Are you making a dinosaur?" "No," said Robert. "I'm making a spaceship." They learned about the weather. "That cloud looks like a dinosaur," said Allosaurus. "No, it looks like a castle," insisted Lila. "A castle for a princess," said Tina. "The princesses," added Kim, and they all giggled. They learned about letters. "Who can tell me a word that starts with the letter A?" asked Mrs. W. "Dinosaur!" roared Allosaurus. "Dinosaur starts with a D," said Mrs. W. "I know," said Allosaurus. "I just like dinosaurs." "I think everyone likes dinosaurs," said Mrs. W. "Not as much as princesses," said Trina. Soon it was time for lunch. "These seats are saved for princesses, not dinosaurs," said Trina. "You're not a real princess," roared Allosaurus. "You're not a real dinosaur," said Trina. "Then why am I eating dinosaur food?" asked Allosaurus. "That's baloney," said Trina, and the other princesses giggled. Allosaurus found a seat at an empty table. She thought about her stuffed dinosaurs back home and wished she could eat lunch with them. "Is this seat being saved?" asked Cindy. "No," said Allosaurus, shaking her head. "Can I sit here?" asked Jason. "Yes," said Allosaurus, sounding surprised. "Is there room for me?" asked Walter. "Of course," said Allosaurus. "That's a nice dinosaur shirt," said Cindy. "I like dinosaurs and I also like dragons." "I like dragons and dinosaurs," said Jason, "but I like lions the best." "And I love my new lunchbox," said Walter. Everyone giggled at that, even Allosaurus. Feeling much better, Allosaurus began to chomp her sandwich with fierce teeth. "Roar! This is how dinosaurs eat." Roar! Soon the whole table was roaring and chomping. When lunch was over, Mrs. W's class headed to the playground, where Allosaurus ran with a lion and Walter, soared with a dragon and Walter, flew in a spaceship, and chased away a band of pirates and Walter. Allosaurus even had tea with some grateful princesses. And afterward the princesses stomped and roared through the jungle with Allosaurus. When the bell rang, Mrs. W walked her class to the school library for the first time. Each student was allowed to pick out a book to read at home that night. "I'm going to find a story about lions," roared Jason. "I'm going to find a story about princesses," said Trina, "or maybe pirates." "I'm going to find a story about lunch boxes," said Walter. "I wonder if they have stories about dinosaurs," said Allosaurus. "We do have stories about dinosaurs," said the librarian, "and stories about cowboys and pirates and butterflies and bunnies." The next morning, Allie hopped out of bed. She couldn't wait to get to school. The end.
Well, here's one more story about a baby, and this is about a rather enormous baby. It's titled The Wicked Big Toddler by Kevin Hawkes and illustrated by Kevin Hawkes. Here comes a baby by a stork package. The new baby came on the snowiest day of the year. When my brothers and I went to visit him in hospital, he reached out and grabbed hold of my finger. Uncle Bert whistled. "That's a wicked big toddler you got there, Jessie." So everybody called him Toddy from then on. The next day, Toddy came home from the hospital. I sat right next to him and held his hand. He was wearing a new hat, mittens, and booties that Minnie Newcomb had knitted for him. Every new baby gets a hat and booties from Minnie. It's a tradition. It took Toddy a long time before he could sleep through the whole night. I played on my fiddle to calm him down. Even the special cradle Uncle Bert and Aunt Jo made for him didn't seem to help. Taking care of Toddy keeps everybody busy, especially when it's time to change the diaper. Phew. Once Toddy learned to sit up, taking baths was a lot of fun. He loves to play with boats. When Toddy's mouth and when his first tooth came in his mouth, he started eating solids. Uncle Bert and I let him have ice cream. Mama wasn't too happy about that. Toddy loves going camping. He likes to splash his toes in the lake and make his favorite animal sounds. Grrr, says the bear. Snort, says the moose. When we go blackberry picking, Toddy likes to eat more than he picks. Babies are such messy eaters. Raking leaves sure is fun with Toddy. Now that he's crawling, it's harder to keep track of him. When all the relatives came at Thanksgiving, Toddy was so excited that he said hello in his biggest Maine voice. Hi, how wad ya hiya? Toddy helped us put the lights up on the tree and outside at holiday time, and he took his first steps. On his first birthday, Toddy got a special birthday cake. He blew out the candle all by himself, which surprised everyone. Toddy loves to be involved with everything, even making maple syrup in the spring and in the spring mud season. He likes to take free samples now and then. That's a wicked big mess, says Uncle Bert. Toddy's bedtime is Mama's favorite time of day. We all sing Toddy to sleep while Uncle Bert plays a soft lullaby. Once he's down for the night, Toddy sleeps like a log. Until it's wake-up time. The end. Wicked big toddler.
Oh, that's cute. I have some poems here. Poems are really nice to read, and they're nice to listen to, but sometimes they aren't so easy to understand all at once, but I think these ones are. These are some poems of comfort, it says. This Place I Know. It's poems selected by Georgia Hurd, and the illustrations are by renowned picture book artists. I'm not going to read all of them, but I've marked the ones I will. This one is by Carla Cushkin, and the illustration is by William Steig, and it's called To You. I like this. I think I could walk through the simmering sand if I held your hand. I think I could swim the skin-shivering sea if you would accompany me, and run on ragged, windy heights and climb rugged rocks and walk on air. I think I could do anything at all if you were there. And this is Commitment in a City. On the great street we two pass. I do not know you. I did not see if you are fat or thin or dark or fair or young or old. If we should pass again within the hour, I would not know it. Yet I am committed to love you. You are part of my city, my universe, my being. If you were not here to pass me by, a piece would be missing from my jigsaw puzzle day. That was by Margaret Suda, and the illustration is by Jill McElmurray. Here's one called Holes. Strangest of gaps, their goneness, mother, father, loved friends. The black holes of the astronomer are not more mysterious. This kind of hole will not be filled with candle flames or even 1,000 thoughts. The hole is inside us. It brims over, is empty and full at once. That's by Lillian Morrison, and the illustration is by Shane W. Evans. This poem is by Nancy Wood, and Petra Mathers drew the picture of a shell. It's called Strengthen the Things That Remain. Rainbows still live in the sky and green grass is growing everywhere. Clouds have familiar shapes and sunsets have not changed color in a long time. Thunder still follows lightning and spring comes after winter's misery. A tree is still a tree and a rock is still a rock. A warbler sings its familiar song and coyotes howl in disconcerting harmony. Grasshoppers still hop to their own music. Bees still buzz with excitement and squirrels still jump like acrobats. Mountains still contain mystery and oceans surge with eternity. Bears still sleep in winter. And eagles fly higher than other birds. Snakes have an affinity for the ground while fish are content in water. Patterns persist. Life goes on. Whatever rises will converge. Do what you will, but strengthen the things that remain. This one is by A.L. Gordon, and the illustration is by Laura McGee Kwasowski. Sorry. Life is mostly froth and bubble. Two things stand like stone. Kindness in another's trouble. Courage in your own. This is a song by Faiz Ahmed Faiz, and the illustration is by Vladimir Radunsky. Pain will cease, do not grieve, do not grieve. Friends will return, the heart will rest. Do not grieve, do not grieve. The wound will be made whole. Do not grieve, do not grieve. Day will come forth. Do not grieve, do not grieve. The cloud will open, night will decline. Do not grieve, do not grieve. The seasons will change. Do not grieve, do not grieve. This one is one of my favorites. It's called Dreams. It's by Langston Hughes, and the illustration here is by Matt Travaris. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field frozen with snow. And this is a poem written by Walt Whitman a long time ago, and the illustration is by Peter Cease. It's from Song of the Broadaxe. What do you think endures? Do you think a great city endures, or a teeming manufacturing state, or a prepared constitution, or the best built steamships? Or hotels of granite and iron, or any chef d'oeuvres of engineering, forts, armaments? Away. These are not to be cherished for themselves. They fill their hour. The dancers dance, the musicians play for them. The show passes, all does well enough, of course. All does very well till one flash of defiance. A great city is that which has the greatest men and women. If it be a few ragged huts, it is still the greatest city in the whole world. This one is by Emily Dickinson. It's about hope, and the picture is by C. Brian Karras. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the song without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never, in extremity, it asked a crumb of me. And the last one is The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry, and illustrated by Kevin Hawkes, who wrote The Wicked Big Toddler. The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world, and am free. The end. And that's the end of our time today. Thank you, and I hope that you have a wonderful day, and come and visit us at the library. There's so many things to check out, so many books, and so many ideas. Thank you. Bye-bye.